The Mafia boss saw the black Maid comforting his autistic son and felt something he'd never felt. The night had settled over the Castellano mansion like a heavy velvet curtain, quiet on the outside but trembling on the inside with a sound that traveled through every marble hallway. It was the sound of a young boy crying. Not the ordinary cry of frustration or tiredness, but a sharp, trembling, heart-rattling wail that rose and fell in waves, shaking even the thick wooden doors of the restricted third floor. The staff had learned to keep their distance. They knew the rules. The boy must not be startled. The boy must not be touched without permission. The boy must not be approached unless the father himself requested it. That father, Dominic Castellano, was known across the city for his terrifying calm and his absolute authority. Yet tonight, behind a closed door in the far corner of the mansion, even he was losing the battle. And down the hallway, carrying a basket of freshly folded towels against her chest, Naomi paused mid-step. Every layer of discipline she had built since starting the job 3 days earlier began to crack. The sound coming from the room was painfully familiar to her. It was a sensory overload cry, frantic and breathless, a cry she had heard from her younger cousin during the moments when the world became too loud and too bright. Naomi tightened her grip on the towels. She knew she should keep walking. She knew the third floor was off limits. She knew the consequences for crossing that line in a house ruled by wealthy men with unforgiving shadows. Yet her feet refused to move. The cry rose again, sharper this time, and something deep in her chest pulled her forward. She tried to tell herself to stop. She tried to remind herself that she needed this job more than anything. Rent was past due. Her elderly aunt needed medicine. She had scraped together every last bit of pride to apply for this housekeeping position. Losing it would be a disaster she could not recover from. But that sound, that trembling, aching cry. Naomi slowly set the basket of towels on a small table. Her hands were shaking. She looked left, then right, hoping no one was watching. The hallway was empty. The boy cried again, and her decision was made. She stepped closer to the door, placing her palm gently against the polished wood as if she could somehow send comfort through it. She whispered a soft greeting, not loud enough to disturb, but just loud enough to steady her own nerves. That was when a pair of heavy footsteps echoed from behind her. Slow, decisive, and carrying a weight that made the air tighten. Naomi froze. She did not need to turn around to know who it was. Dominic Castellano was standing at the end of the hallway, watching her. His silhouette was carved in stillness, broad shoulders, tailored suit, presence cold enough to stop breath. But behind him, the boy's cry rose again, trembling with fear, and Naomi felt her heart twist in a way she could no longer ignore. The night was holding its breath, and she was about to break one of the strictest rules in the mansion. Naomi's breath caught as she stood frozen in the hallway, her hand still resting on the polished wooden door. The cries on the other side trembled with a raw, aching fear that pulled at every instinct inside her, but now the air behind her carried an even heavier weight. Dominic Castellano moved closer with slow, deliberate steps, the kind that announced authority without a single word spoken. Naomi could feel his presence before she dared to turn. When she finally lifted her eyes, Dominic was only a few feet away, towering over her with a stillness that could silence thunder. His expression was unreadable, carved from something colder than marble, yet beneath that cold surface there was exhaustion tightening the corners of his eyes. The cries behind the door broke again, a higher pitch, a desperate plea, and Dominic's jaw tightened. Naomi realized something in that moment. This powerful man, feared across the city, did not know how to help his own child. And he hated that. Dominic's voice came out low and controlled, but the edges trembled with fatigue. "Who told you to come up here?" Naomi swallowed hard. "No one told me, sir. I just heard him crying, and I thought." "You thought what?" His tone was sharper now, but not cruel. It was the voice of a man holding himself together with the last thread of patience. Naomi lowered her gaze, her hands tightening at her sides. "I thought he sounded scared. I thought he needed someone." Dominic took in a slow breath, as if steadying himself. His eyes lifted toward the door, and for a brief heartbeat Naomi saw something she had not expected to see. Fear. Not fear of a threat. Fear of losing control. Fear of failing his son. "No one in this house goes near him without my permission," Dominic said. His voice was quieter now, almost hoarse. He hates being touched. He hates being approached. He does not trust anyone. The boy cried out again, a trembling shriek that echoed down the hallway like breaking glass. Naomi felt her chest tighten. She stepped forward instinctively, but Dominic's hand lifted in a quick warning. His palm hovered inches from her arm, not touching, but commanding. "Do not," he said. "Not unless you want to make it worse." Naomi blinked. "I understand the rules, sir. But I know that cry." Dominic's gaze finally landed on her fully, and this time it stayed. His dark eyes narrowed as if examining her for the first time, not as a maid, but as something else entirely. "You know that cry?" he repeated. "Yes, sir. My cousin. He is autistic. When he is overwhelmed, his voice sounds exactly like that. And you think that means you know what to do with my son?" Naomi did not hesitate. "No, sir. I would never assume that. Every child is different. But I know what fear sounds like. And right now, he sounds very, very afraid." The hallway fell silent except for the soft thud of Mateo's fists hitting the cushioned floor inside the room. Dominic pressed his thumb against his temple, the faintest sign of a man pushed beyond his limit. Naomi watched him breathe, watched the tension in his shoulders, watched the part of him that was not a mafia boss at all. He was a father who was losing hope. Finally, his voice lowered to a whisper barely audible in the dim hallway. "He has been like this for hours. The specialist left 3 hours ago. The last nanny quit yesterday morning. No one can calm him. Nobody." Naomi felt something warm rise in her chest, something steady. "May I try?" she asked. Dominic's head lifted sharply at her question. His expression hardened. "This is not a simple task, Naomi. My son does not open up. He does not respond. He does not." He paused. His voice softened. "He does not let people close." Naomi nodded slowly. "I am not asking to go in, sir. I just want to be near him. Maybe he will hear someone who is not frightened of his feelings." Dominic studied her again. This time, the ice in his eyes cracked just slightly, barely enough to see the exhausted father beneath. Another cry from behind the door broke whatever hesitation he still held. He stepped aside, but his voice dropped to a command that left no room for confusion. "One mistake, Naomi. If he gets worse, you leave immediately." Naomi met his gaze with quiet certainty. "I understand." She placed her hand gently on the doorknob. The air tightened. The mansion seemed to hold its breath again, and Naomi pushed the door open with the softest motion, stepping into the place where fear and innocence trembled together in the dim light. Naomi stepped slowly into the dimly lit room, her breath catching as the sound of Mateo's frantic sobs filled the space like a trembling storm. The soft night light cast a warm orange glow across the walls, revealing scattered sensory toys and a small pile of blankets pushed against the corner where the young boy curled into himself. His tiny shoulders shook with each breath, his hands pressed tightly over his ears as if trying to block out a world that felt too sharp and too overwhelming. Naomi did not move any closer. She stood just inside the doorway, letting her eyes adjust and letting Mateo sense her presence without forcing it. The air felt thick, vibrating with the child's fear, and Naomi felt her heart tighten with an aching familiarity. She had seen this scene before, in her cousin's bedroom back home, when the world would become too loud and too bright for him to bear. Behind her, Dominic remained in the hallway, his silhouette tense in the doorway, watching with an intensity that seemed to hold the entire mansion in place. He did not speak. He did not breathe. He simply watched Naomi, as if the smallest movement from her might either save his son or break him further. Naomi took a slow breath and lowered herself to the floor with deliberate softness. She made sure her knees touched the carpet gently, creating no sudden sound that could startle the already overwhelmed child. She did not approach him. Instead, she sat several feet away, close enough to be noticed, but far enough to give him space. Mateo's cries wavered, just for a second, as if he felt the shift in the room. Naomi let her hands rest in her lap and spoke in a soft, steady whisper that carried the warmth of a summer breeze. "Hello, Mateo. My name is Naomi. I am not here to hurt you. I am sitting right here on the soft carpet. You are not alone." The boy did not look at her, but the pitch of his cry changed slightly, becoming less sharp, less frantic. Naomi recognized that tiny change. She continued speaking, her voice even and gentle. "Sometimes the world gets too loud. Sometimes it feels like everything is happening all at once. I know that feeling. It is all right to be scared. Her words were not instructions. They were not demands. They were simple acknowledgments, the kind that told a frightened child that his feelings were real and safe to have. Mateo rocked faster for a moment, his breath coming in short bursts. Naomi remained absolutely still. After several quiet seconds, she began to hum. It was the same melody she had used for her cousin, a low, steady tune that rose and fell like a calm heartbeat. The sound was soft enough to avoid overwhelming him, but constant enough to reach through the storm in his mind. Mateo's rocking slowed. His small fingers relaxed slightly from his hair. Naomi continued humming, letting the sound fill the room without crowding it. She glanced toward the door. Dominic was still there, his posture rigid, his eyes locked on the scene unfolding in front of him. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of suspicion, hope, fear, and something deeper that Naomi could not yet name. Naomi returned her attention to the young boy. "Mateo, I am still here," she whispered. The melody softened into words. "The room is safe. Nobody is going to hurt you. You are doing your best." Little by little, Mateo's cries weakened. The trembling in his shoulders eased, and he peeked out from behind his hands. His eyes were glassy with tears, wide with uncertainty, but he was finally searching instead of hiding. Naomi offered a small smile, warm and patient. "You are very brave, Mateo. You are doing so well." Mateo made a tiny sound in his throat, a confused whimper, and lifted his head just slightly toward the sound of her voice. Naomi did not lean forward. She did not reach out. She let him choose the distance. Outside the room, Dominic exhaled for the first time in many minutes, the breath shaky, almost broken. His eyes dropped to the floor, then back to his son, but he remained silent, afraid that any word would shatter the fragile peace Naomi had begun to build. And inside the quiet, glowing room, the chaos in Mateo's little world began, slowly and gently, to loosen its grip. Naomi kept her voice soft and steady as the room slowly shifted from chaos to a fragile calm. But the storm inside Mateo was not gone. It trembled beneath the surface, ready to break again with the slightest wrong sound. His small hands were still shaking, his breath coming in uneven pulls, and his eyes darted between Naomi and the shadows of the room, as if unsure which direction held safety. Naomi remained completely still, sitting on the carpet a respectful distance away, her hands resting calmly in her lap. She knew this stage well, the moment when a child felt caught between panic and exhaustion, when one loud breath, one sudden move, could send him spiraling back into terror. She let her voice fall into another gentle hum, barely louder than a whisper, a warm vibration that softened the air around them. Mateo's gaze flickered toward her. Just a flicker, but it was enough. Naomi smiled in the calm, patient way she had learned from years of caring for her cousin. "You are doing so well, Mateo. I am right here. You are safe." The boy whimpered, a soft sound, but not the sharp cry from before. He shifted under the blanket and rocked a little faster for a moment. Naomi did not react. She continued humming, letting her tone settle like a quiet heartbeat. Behind her, Dominic stood frozen in the doorway, his tall frame tense, his fingers curled slightly at his sides. For years he had stood in this hallway watching experts attempt to soothe his son, listening to explanations written in complicated language, watching therapists with degrees from expensive universities fail to reach the child he loved more than anything. And now, this young woman, this quiet maid who had been in his house for only 3 days, was reaching into the storm Mateo lived in and calming it with nothing more than her presence and a song. The disbelief on Dominic's face deepened with each passing second. He did not understand it. He did not trust it. But he could not deny what he was seeing. Naomi lowered her voice and shifted slightly, making sure her movements were slow and predictable. Mateo's eyes tracked her, uncertain but curious. She reached into her pocket and brought out a small object, a soft fabric bracelet she used for her cousin during difficult moments. She held it in her palm, open and visible, but she did not move closer. Mateo noticed. His rocking slowed. His fingers twitched. Naomi whispered, "This is something that helps when things feel too big. You can touch it if you want. You do not have to." Mateo stared at the bracelet. His breathing steadied by a small degree, the rise and fall of his chest no longer rapid and painful. Naomi placed the bracelet gently on the floor between them and then folded her hands again, showing him she would not take a single step he did not choose. The room was filled with the low hum of her voice, the steady glow of the night light, and the gentle sound of Mateo's breathing. Dominic's jaw tightened. He pressed his hand against the doorframe, his knuckles white, his eyes locked on the tiny moment happening between his son and this woman. And then it happened. A small, almost invisible shift. Mateo crawled forward a few inches, his small fingers reaching out toward the bracelet. He touched it tentatively, then pulled his hand back, then touched it again. Naomi smiled. "That is very good, Mateo. You are so brave." Mateo let out a trembling sigh, the kind that comes from a child letting go of fear drop by drop. His shoulders eased. His hands relaxed. His eyes lifted fully toward Naomi for the first time. Dominic's breath caught sharply, so quietly that not even Naomi heard it. He had waited so long to see his son look at another human being with anything other than fear. And tonight, in this room filled with soft shadows and heartbreak, a stranger had been the one to make it happen. The pressure of the moment hung thick in the air, and Dominic's usually impenetrable expression wavered, the first crack of emotion breaking through the armor he had worn for years. In that fragile space, Naomi held still, letting Mateo come to her in his own time, letting him guide the fragile connection forming between them. And as the room softened around them, the tension of the mansion itself seemed to ease, as if even the walls knew something impossible was unfolding. Naomi watched Mateo carefully as he touched the small fabric bracelet again, his fingers trembling with a mixture of curiosity and caution. The room felt suspended in a thin, fragile peace, the kind that could shatter with one wrong sound or one sudden movement. She kept her breathing slow and even, her posture relaxed, letting the calm inside her become something he could lean toward. She knew this stage. She had lived it countless times with her cousin. This was the moment when a child, overwhelmed by too many sensations and too many emotions, hovered between progress and collapse. One misplaced word could send him spiraling back into fear. One patient pause could help him take another small step forward. From the doorway, Dominic remained completely still, as if he believed that even shifting his weight could break the delicate balance forming between Naomi and his son. His eyes stayed locked on Mateo, watching each tiny movement as if it were the most important thing he had witnessed in years. Mateo brushed the bracelet again, then picked it up with both hands. Naomi smiled softly. "That is a very good job, Mateo. You are doing something very brave." Mateo rocked gently, the motion slower now, more controlled. Naomi sensed the shift in his breathing, lighter and more even, though a faint tremor still clung to the edges of each inhale. The boy lowered the bracelet to his lap, then looked at Naomi for a second time. His eyes were unsure, but they were looking, and that alone was something powerful. Naomi kept her distance, speaking in the same quiet tone. "I know it feels like everything is too much right now. Sometimes the lights are too bright. Sometimes the sounds feel like they get stuck in your head. Sometimes your heart beats fast and your hands shake. But you are not alone. You are doing so well." Mateo whimpered again, and for a moment Naomi thought he might withdraw back into himself. His shoulders tightened, his lower lip quivered, and his eyes darted toward the corner as if the fear might return. Naomi did not move. She let the silence settle around them, not heavy, but gentle. She continued to hum the familiar melody, letting the sound fill the room like a warm blanket. Slowly, Mateo's shoulders loosened. He rubbed the bracelet between his fingers, the soft texture grounding him. Naomi noticed the way his feet shifted under the blanket, the way his posture eased toward something more open. It was a fragile shift, but it was real. Behind Naomi, Dominic pressed a hand to the doorframe. His breathing was shallow, almost unsteady. His son had not calmed this much in weeks. And now, a woman he barely knew was soothing him with nothing more than patience and the simple courage to stay by his side. Naomi spoke again, her words gentle. "When my cousin felt scared like you are feeling now, he liked to hold something soft. It helped him remember that he was safe." Mateo's eyes flicked up. The bracelet slipped from his hand and landed softly on the carpet. He leaned forward and reached for it again, this time with less hesitation. Naomi let her smile grow just a little wider. "Very good. You are doing that all by yourself. You are stronger than you think, Mateo." The boy made a small sound, something quiet and uncertain, but it was not a cry. It was something closer to a question, a soft vocal attempt that Naomi recognized as a sign of trust forming. Her heart warmed at the sound. "You can make any sound you want," she whispered. "You do not have to hide it. You are safe." Little by little, Matteo slid a few inches closer. It was not a large movement, but Dominic inhaled sharply, disbelief twisting into something raw on his face. He had never seen his son approach another person willingly. Not this quickly, not this quietly, and certainly not someone he had met only minutes ago. Naomi stayed perfectly still. Her knees ached from sitting on the carpet, but she ignored the discomfort. This was not about her. This was about the terrified child in front of her and the father behind her who had forgotten what hope felt like. Matteo's hand reached out again, trembling but deliberate, and rested on the bracelet. Naomi kept humming, her voice steady and soft, the room growing quieter with each passing second. The storm inside the little boy was not gone, but it was no longer crushing him. And for the first time in a very long while, Dominic realized he was witnessing something he never believed he would see. His son was letting someone in. Dominic remained in the doorway, his tall figure framed by the dim light of the hallway, but something in his presence had changed. The rigid tension that usually shaped his shoulders had loosened a little, and the cold sharpness in his eyes had softened into something far more human. Naomi did not look back at him, but she felt the shift as clearly as if the air itself had moved. She continued humming, letting the steady rhythm act like a soft guide for Matteo's breathing. The young boy held the small fabric bracelet close to his chest now, clutching it with trembling fingers, but the tremble came from exhaustion, not panic. His rocking had slowed to a faint sway, and the frantic whimpers that had once filled the room had quieted into small, uneven breaths. Naomi kept her posture open and gentle, her knees still on the carpet, her hands resting in her lap. She knew she could not move too quickly. She knew she could not reach for him. Everything depended on letting Matteo decide what came next. Matteo lifted his eyes toward her again, and this time they lingered. He blinked slowly, tears still clinging to the edges, but he did not look away. Naomi felt a warm ache bloom in her chest. "You are doing so well, Matteo. I am right here with you." The child inhaled shakily and made a small sound, almost like a question. Naomi understood immediately. Did something feel too loud? Did something feel too bright? Did something hurt? She let her voice drop to an even gentler whisper. "If your ears feel tight, you can put your hands on your head. If your chest feels too fast, you can hold the bracelet and breathe with it. You can do whatever helps." Matteo hesitated, then pressed the bracelet gently against his cheek. Naomi's smile deepened. "That is wonderful, Matteo. That is a very smart choice." Behind her, Dominic exhaled sharply through his nose as if forcing himself not to speak, not to interrupt, not to rush toward his son in a desperate attempt to finally hold him. Naomi continued humming again, letting her voice flow like a soft river through the quiet room. She watched as Matteo's breathing slowed a little more, watched as his shoulders relaxed into the blanket, watched as the fear in his eyes flickered and dimmed. And then she saw something else. A tiny shift, a small lean toward her. Barely an inch, barely a motion, but it was a choice. Naomi's heart squeezed. She spoke softly again. "You are not alone, Matteo. You have done so many brave things tonight. You can rest if you want to." Matteo blinked, his lashes still wet. He pulled the blanket up beside him and curled his knees slightly under his chest, the bracelet still pressed between his fingers. His breathing found a slower rhythm, the rise and fall steadying as the tension melted away, little by little. Naomi lowered her voice even further, almost to a silent hum. She watched him, not intrusively, but with the protective gentleness of someone who understood the weight of his small world. Minutes passed in that fragile calm. Dominic shifted behind her, the sound so subtle that Naomi might have missed it if not for how closely she was listening to the room. She slowly turned her head toward him. Their eyes met. Naomi saw the cracks in his expression more clearly now. Exhaustion, fear, helplessness, and buried beneath it all, a father's desperate worry. Naomi spoke in a whisper. "He is coming down from the sensory overload. He is very tired." Dominic's jaw tightened, his voice low and unsteady. "He has never calmed like this. Not this quickly. Not with anyone." Naomi nodded. "His body needed to feel safe. That is what he is responding to." Dominic looked at his son with a gaze that trembled between awe and disbelief. Naomi turned back to Matteo, letting her voice soften again. You are safe, Matteo. You did everything right. Your feelings are not too big. Your feelings are allowed. Slowly, Matteo's eyes closed. His small hand loosened around the bracelet. His breathing settled into tiny, even waves. He had not fallen fully asleep, but he had drifted into the gentlest place a child could reach after hours of fear. Naomi stayed absolutely still, her presence anchoring the peace in the room. Dominic watched in silence, unable to speak, because in this quiet moment, he had just witnessed something he had never thought possible. His son had let someone in, and that someone was Naomi. Naomi remained seated on the soft carpet beside Matteo, her posture calm and steady, but inside her chest a quiet tension grew. She could sense that the gentle peace Matteo had slipped into was fragile, like a thin layer of glass spread across deep water. Any sharp movement, any unexpected sound, could break it and send him spiraling back into fear. His eyes were closed now, his breathing slow, his small hands curled loosely around the bracelet he held so tightly only minutes before. But his body still contained faint tremors, tiny reminders of the storm he had just survived. Naomi knew this moment well. It was the fragile space between calm and collapse, a moment where a single wrong choice could undo everything. She kept her breathing soft and even, humming the softest version of the melody that had helped soothe him earlier. Her voice floated through the dim room like warm air, grounding him even as he drifted. Behind her, Dominic lingered in the doorway, unmoving. His hands were still pressed against the doorframe, but his grip had loosened, his shoulders lowered, and for the first time since Naomi had met him, he looked less like the untouchable figure everyone feared and more like a man fighting to hold himself together. Dominic's voice came quietly, barely above a whisper, as if he were afraid of breathing too loudly. Naomi, is he all right? Naomi nodded, her eyes still on the sleeping boy. He is exhausted, sir. His senses were overwhelmed for a very long time. His body needs this calm, even if it is only for a little while. Dominic exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that carried hours of fear and a lifetime of helplessness. Naomi heard the sound and felt a tug of empathy, so strong it nearly pushed tears into her eyes. She lowered her voice even further. It is a good sign that he allowed himself to rest, sir. It means he felt safe enough to let go for a moment. Dominic swallowed hard. His voice was heavy with emotion. Safe. With you. Naomi did not respond right away. The weight in his words filled the room like a slow-moving tide. She kept her gaze on Matteo, watching the soft rise and fall of his chest. After a moment she whispered, soft but certain. Children like Matteo can sense when someone is afraid of them. Tonight, he felt someone who was not afraid. Dominic took a small step into the room, his footsteps deep but slow. Naomi kept her focus on Matteo, but she felt Dominic standing just behind her now, close enough that she could feel the faint shift in the air as he breathed. Naomi, he whispered, why did you go to him? You barely know him. You barely know me. Naomi finally lifted her eyes toward him, her expression gentle and honest. Sir, fear does not wait for permission, and neither does compassion. Dominic stared at her, his dark eyes searching her face for something he could not identify. For years he had built his life on rules, structure, and control. Yet nothing in him had been able to reach his son tonight. Nothing in him had known how to quiet the storm. And this young woman, this quiet maid with soft eyes and trembling hands, had walked into the place where he felt the most powerless and done what no one else could. She had stepped into the dark without hesitation. She had comforted the only person he could not protect. Dominic's voice cracked just slightly, the sound barely audible. You walked into a room that terrifies everyone. Why? Naomi looked back at Matteo and whispered, because someone once walked into the dark for my cousin when he needed it. Someone did not run away from him. Someone stayed. Dominic absorbed her words slowly, each one sinking deeper into him. His eyes moved from Naomi to his son, then back to her. He spoke again, this time raw. And you felt that you should be that person for him. Naomi nodded once. Yes, sir. Dominic's breath caught, more fragile than before. And then, without warning, the tension inside him snapped into something sharp and fearful. He stepped closer, his voice pressing with urgency. Naomi, what if you had been wrong? What if he had hurt you? You could have been injured. You could have made everything worse. Naomi's gaze softened, but her voice stayed steady. I know that, sir. But sometimes you have to choose between fear and empathy. And tonight, empathy won. Dominic stared at her, unable to speak. Mateo stirred slightly and Naomi immediately lowered her voice into a soft hum again, guiding him back into safety. Dominic watched, frozen, as Mateo's small body relaxed once more. In that long stretch of quiet, Dominic realized something that shook him more deeply than anything else had tonight. Naomi had not just calmed his son. She had stepped into his family's most vulnerable pain, and she had done it without fear. Naomi kept her voice low and steady as Mateo drifted between light sleep and quiet exhaustion, the room wrapped in a fragile calm that felt both miraculous and impossibly delicate. She could sense the shift in his breathing, the tremble in his small fingers easing little by little, but she also knew that this calm was not permanent. Children who carried storms inside them often woke suddenly, disoriented and frightened, and the smallest disruption could pull them back into panic. She stayed perfectly still, letting her presence remain the anchor he needed. Dominic watched her closely, his tall frame now fully inside the room, though he moved with deliberate quiet, almost as if he feared interrupting something sacred. His eyes followed every small motion Naomi made, as if trying to understand how she had done what trained specialists could not. Naomi finally looked toward him, giving him a gentle nod that signaled Mateo was resting enough for conversation without disturbing him. Dominic lowered himself into a crouch beside her, careful to stay a respectful distance from his son. It was a posture he rarely took, and the lowered height made him look less like the feared man who ruled over power and danger, and more like a father carrying years of worry on his shoulders. His voice was a low whisper. I have never seen him reach toward someone. Not like this. Not without screaming. Naomi kept her eyes on Mateo. Children sense intention more than actions, sir. They know when someone means harm. They know when someone is afraid of them. And they know when someone sees them. Dominic let those words settle. His gaze moved from Mateo's small frame to the side of Naomi's face, studying her thoughtfully. And you think he felt seen? Naomi nodded. Yes, sir. He felt understood. Dominic looked down at his hands, the smallest tremor running through his fingers. He cleared his throat quietly. Specialists have tried everything. Different therapies, different routines, different strategies. They all say to follow protocols, to follow step-by-step approaches. They tell me that outcome depends on consistency, structure, predictability. They make it sound like a science. Naomi smiled softly. Science helps. Structure helps. But children like Mateo do not respond to checklists. They respond to connection. They need someone who speaks to the part of them that feels afraid. Dominic's eyes flicked toward his son again. Fear. His voice wavered. He has been afraid for so long. Naomi nodded again, her tone warm but honest. That fear is real, sir. But it does not mean he cannot grow or learn or trust. It means he needs more time, more patience, and more moments like this when someone meets him where he is. Dominic watched Mateo carefully, as if seeing him through a new lens for the first time. He whispered, almost to himself, I thought he hated being touched. Naomi responded gently. He does not hate touch, sir. He fears touch that comes too quickly or too unexpectedly. He needs choice. He needs to feel in control of when someone gets close. Mateo stirred lightly in his sleep, shifting the blanket against his cheek. Dominic tensed, but Naomi calmly continued humming until the boy settled again. Dominic closed his eyes for a moment, the relief in his posture clear. Naomi whispered, he can learn to let people in. He just needs someone who understands how to enter his world without forcing him to enter theirs. Dominic opened his eyes slowly and looked at Naomi in a way he had never looked at anyone before. It was not suspicion. It was not cold calculation. It was a quiet, raw acknowledgement of something he had never experienced. Respect and gratitude. He spoke softly. You walked into his world tonight. Naomi shook her head gently. No, sir. I followed him into it. There is a difference. Dominic absorbed that in silence. The room felt still, as if the entire mansion recognized the shift in its walls. Naomi continued in a soft whisper. The fear he feels, it will not go away overnight. There will be hard days. Long days. Moments when it feels like progress disappears. But tonight shows that he can be reached. He can be comforted. He can trust. Dominic looked at his son again, then at Naomi. His voice carried a quiet awe. You have no idea what this means. Naomi's reply was gentle. I think I do, sir. Mateo sighed softly, the kind of small, peaceful sound that broke open a deeper silence in the room. And in that moment, Dominic Castellano, a man known for power, control, and command, realized for the first time that his greatest vulnerability and his greatest hope were lying on a blanket on the floor, breathing softly beside the woman who had stepped into the storm without hesitation. I am continuing directly from the previous section, keeping the timeline seamless and the emotional tone aligned with the motif unexpected kindness and healing child. Mateo rested in his light sleep, the room wrapped in a tender silence that felt too fragile to touch. Naomi kept her posture steady, gently humming under her breath to maintain the calm that had been so hard-won. But even as peace settled over the small boy, the energy around the doorway began to shift. Someone was coming. Naomi sensed it before she heard it. Heavy footsteps clicked against the marble hallway floor outside. Too sharp, too impatient, too careless for a house that had just survived a storm. Dominic stiffened instantly. His entire demeanor changed. The soft humanity Naomi had glimpsed retreating as a colder, more familiar mask slid over his features. He rose to his full height, turning toward the door with a presence that could silence entire rooms. Naomi's humming remained soft, steady, but her eyes lifted to the door as well. A moment later, the tall figure of Marissa, the household manager, appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale and tight with irritation, her posture rigid with the sharp confidence of someone who believed she understood her job better than anyone else. She took in the scene with a startled gasp, her eyes widening at the sight of Naomi sitting so close to the young boy, her expression twisting into something disapproving and condescending. Sir, Marissa hissed in a sharp whisper, her tone filled with restrained anger. What is she doing in here? She has absolutely no authorization to be on this floor. Dominic raised one hand immediately. Be quiet. Marissa faltered, taken aback, but her indignation did not fade. She lowered her voice only slightly. Sir, she is a maid. A new maid. She does not have the training to handle Mateo. She could have made the situation worse. You know how dangerous this kind of meltdown can be if handled incorrectly. Dominic turned his head slowly, fixing her with a stare so cold that it froze the rest of her words in her throat. Naomi kept her eyes on Mateo, never breaking the fragile rhythm that kept him steady. Marissa, Dominic said, his voice low and lethal. Look at him. Marissa's breath caught. She looked at Mateo, really looked, and her eyes widened again. The child was not screaming. He was not rocking violently. He was not clawing at his hair or hitting the walls. He was resting, calm, breathing softly. His hands relaxed, his body no longer trembling. Marissa's voice trembled. He is calm. Dominic's jaw tensed. Yes. Marissa struggled to form words. But the specialist said. The specialists are gone. Dominic snapped quietly. They left hours ago. She did this. Naomi kept humming, her tone unbroken, her focus entirely on the little boy. Marissa tried again, flustered and desperate to regain her footing. But sir, she is not qualified. She has no formal training. She is not supposed to interact with him directly. She is breaking every rule we have established in this house. Dominic stepped closer to Marissa, lowering his voice to a cold, razor-thin whisper that carried far more danger than any shout. Marissa, be very careful with what you say next. Marissa swallowed hard, glancing nervously at Naomi as if she had committed an unforgivable crime simply by caring. Sir, I am only thinking about Mateo's safety. This is not appropriate. She is staff. She is not equipped to be near him. Dominic's eyes hardened. Mateo reached for her, and he has never reached for anyone in this house. Not once. Naomi felt her heart squeeze, but she kept her attention on the sleeping boy. She did not react. She did not move. She simply stayed with him, steady and present. Marissa looked caught between outrage and disbelief, her lips pressed tightly together. Sir, she whispered. Please. You cannot let this continue. Dominic took a step closer, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Marissa, he said quietly, if you ever raise your voice at Naomi again, especially in front of my son, you will be out of this house within the hour. Marissa's face drained of color. Sir, I am only trying to protect the household. Dominic leaned in slightly, his voice colder than winter glass. And I am protecting my son. The room went silent. Marissa stared at him, realization dawning slowly. She looked at Naomi, still kneeling on the floor, steady and calm beside the child she had soothed when no one else could. The imbalance of power shifted, sharp and undeniable. The woman she dismissed as just a maid had done something extraordinary. Naomi continued humming, unaware of the storm behind her. And in that suspended moment, while the room held its breath, Dominic Castellano made a silent decision that would change everything. Naomi continued her soft humming, the gentle melody floating through the dim room like a protective veil around Matteo. His breathing remained steady, his small body resting in the calm he had fought so hard to reach. She did not dare shift her weight or move too suddenly. She knew the fragile piece could break if she disrupted the rhythm that soothed him. Behind her, the tension that had filled the doorway began to drain away as Marissa retreated down the hall in a mix of shock and fear, leaving Dominic and Naomi alone with the quiet breaths of the resting child. When Naomi finally lifted her gaze toward Dominic, he was already looking at her. It was not the cold, unreadable stare he had worn earlier, nor the guarded suspicion she had grown used to in their brief interactions. His expression held something else entirely, something deeper that he did not know how to name. He stepped closer, moving with deliberate care, as if approaching a fragile truth he was not yet ready to break. He crouched beside Naomi, mirroring the posture she had held for nearly an hour. Neither spoke at first. The silence carried too much meaning. Dominic's voice emerged as a quiet whisper, one shaped by awe and something far more vulnerable. "How did you do that?" Naomi kept her eyes on Matteo as she spoke. "I listened, sir." He needed someone to hear the fear under the sound. Dominic shook his head slowly, his gaze drifting to the little boy who had been unreachable for so long. His voice cracked at the edges. "He never lets anyone near him. Not even me." Naomi let the truth settle for a breath before she responded, her tone soft. "He let you near him tonight, sir." Dominic inhaled sharply, a subtle but painful sound. He looked at her as if he wanted to believe her, but did not trust himself to hope. Naomi continued gently. "When you walked closer," his breathing slowed for a moment. "He felt you. He knew you were here." Dominic bowed his head, the small gesture revealing a weight he had carried alone for far too many years. She watched him press his hand to the carpet, inches from his son, as if grounding himself to the moment. When he finally lifted his eyes again, they were unguarded. "Naomi," he whispered, almost afraid of his own words. "Thank you." Two simple words, yet they trembled under the weight of everything he had never been able to say. Naomi responded softly. "You do not have to thank me, sir. I only did what anyone with understanding would have done." Dominic shook his head, his voice firm but gentle. "No, you did what no one else has done. The specialists leave with excuses. The staff hides from him. The world does not know how to love him. But you walked into his fear. You saw him. You reached him." Naomi felt warmth rise in her chest, but she kept her focus on Matteo, mindful of the moment. "He is a wonderful child, sir. He is not broken. He is overwhelmed. And what he did tonight, letting someone close, that means he is capable of trust. That means he is capable of connection." Dominic looked at his son with a tenderness so raw it made his voice unsteady. "I have waited years to see him breathe like this." Naomi nodded. "He needed connection, sir. And he chose to find it." Dominic let the quiet settle again, his eyes tracing the gentle movements of his son's chest. Then he turned back to Naomi. His voice shifted, deepened, softened. "Naomi, look at me." She hesitated before meeting his eyes. What she saw there was not power, not intimidation, not the mask of a man feared across the city. Instead, she saw gratitude heavy enough to bring a tremor to his breath. He whispered, "I do not know what I am doing. I do not know how to help him." Naomi's eyes softened. "You are helping him by loving him, sir." Dominic's expression broke with a softness he had never shown. "But that is not enough. I need to know what to do. I need to understand him." Naomi nodded once, her voice steady. "Then let him guide you. One quiet moment at a time. That is all Matteo needs." Dominic swallowed hard, his voice thick. "And you, Naomi, you helped him without fear." Naomi's reply was gentle. "Fear does not save children, sir. Patience does. Kindness does. Choice does." Dominic let those words settle deep inside him. Then, with a breath that felt like surrender, he whispered, "Teach me." Naomi blinked, startled. Teach me how to reach my own son. The room grew still again, but this time, the silence felt full of possibility. Naomi did not answer right away. Instead, she watched Mateo breathe, watched his small hand rest peacefully on the bracelet. And then she whispered the words that would forever change what bound them together. I will, sir. I will teach you everything I know. Dominic closed his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by the quiet miracle happening in front of him. When he opened them again, he looked at Naomi not as a maid, not as staff, but as the one person who had brought his son light in a world full of shadows. Naomi kept her eyes on Mateo as he rested, the soft glow of the night light casting warm shadows across his small frame. His breathing was steady now, gentle and even, the kind of rhythm that only came when the world finally loosened its grip on him. She watched the way his fingers curled around the bracelet, how his shoulders had relaxed, how the storm that once consumed him now flickered quietly at the edges instead of roaring through his entire body. Behind her, Dominic remained close, still crouched low, still unsettled by the realization that he was witnessing something he had not seen in years. When he spoke again, his voice carried the fragile honesty of a man who had spent far too long trying to be invincible. Naomi, he whispered, how did you know what to do? Naomi did not look at him right away. She let her eyes stay on Mateo, grounding her words in the quiet understanding that guided every action she took. Because I have seen this before, sir. I have lived it with someone I love. Dominic hesitated. His voice lost its confident edge. Your cousin. Naomi nodded. Yes, sir. She finally looked at Dominic, her eyes warm with the memory. When he was little, he would get overwhelmed very easily. Sound, light, too many people, too many feelings. The world felt too loud for him. He would scream, cry, hide, and no one knew what to do. People thought he was being difficult. They misunderstood him, judged him, and sometimes even feared him. Dominic's expression softened. And what did you do? Naomi smiled softly, though it carried the weight of old pain. I sat with him. I stayed. I did not force him to be someone he was not ready to be. I let him guide me toward what helped him feel safe. Dominic studied her face, absorbing every detail, every quiet truth she spoke. And did it help him? Naomi nodded. Yes, sir. Little by little, it helped him trust. It helped him grow. It helped him understand that he was not alone. She looked back at Mateo, her voice lowering to a whisper. Children like him do not need perfection. They need presence. Dominic swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. Naomi, he whispered, I have failed him. I do not know how to reach him. I do not know how to speak to him. I do not know how to be what he needs. Naomi shook her head gently. You have not failed him, sir. You have loved him the best way you knew how. Dominic's voice wavered. But love has not been enough. Naomi spoke softly, her tone steady and sure. Love is the beginning, sir. Understanding is the bridge. Patience is the path. She let her words linger in the quiet air. Dominic's eyes moved from her to the small boy beside them, and she saw something shift inside him. The weight of years of guilt began to crack, just slightly, replaced by something unfamiliar. Something like hope. Naomi lowered her voice again. If you give him time, if you meet him where he is, he will learn to trust you. I promise you that. Dominic's gaze stayed on Mateo for a long moment before returning to her. And what about you, Naomi? How did you learn to hold someone else's pain without breaking under it? The question reached someplace deep inside her. She inhaled slowly, steadying her emotions. Because someone did that for me once. Dominic's expression changed. There was a gentleness in his eyes now that had not been there before, a softness that came from recognizing a hidden wound. Naomi continued. When I was young, I struggled with a lot of things. Fear, loneliness, the feeling that I did not fit anywhere. My grandmother was the one who saw me. She helped me learn that sensitivity was not a weakness. It was a way of understanding the world. Dominic lowered his gaze. You speak about it like you miss her. Naomi smiled with a quiet sadness. I do, sir. Every day? Dominic looked at her with a depth that made the room feel smaller, quieter, more intimate. Your grandmother taught you how to love. Naomi nodded. Yes, sir. And Mateo is teaching you the same thing. Dominic's breath caught. Her words wrapped around him like a revelation he had never allowed himself to imagine. Naomi added softly, You do not have to know everything right away, sir. You just have to stay. Mateo shifted slightly in his sleep, the soft rustle of the blanket filling the room. Dominic watched him with new eyes, eyes that held warmth instead of fear, tenderness instead of frustration. He whispered, "I want to learn." Naomi smiled gently. "And I will help you, sir. Every step of the way." In that moment, something unspoken formed between them, something fragile and deeply human. Respect, trust, and the beginning of a bond neither of them had expected when the night began. Naomi kept her gaze on Matteo, watching the gentle rise and fall of his small chest, sensing the steady rhythm that told her he was holding on to the fragile calm he had fought for. The soft glow of the night light washed over him, collecting in warm streaks along his cheek, catching the faint shimmer of dried tears that had once marked his fear. Now, they marked survival. Dominic remained beside her, his presence no longer heavy with command, but softened by a depth he had kept buried for far too long. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of truth, full of everything he had never said, full of everything she understood without needing words. He looked at his son, then at her, and something unspoken tightened inside him. A decision, something shifting, something inevitable. Naomi could sense it before he even spoke. Dominic's voice came quietly, rough around the edges, as if shaped by years of carrying his grief alone. "Naomi," he whispered, "I cannot let this be the last time he feels safe. I need to make sure this never disappears." She nodded gently, still watching Matteo. "Safety is not a moment, sir. It is a relationship." Dominic exhaled, the sound low and unsteady. "Then help me build it." Naomi finally looked fully at him, her expression soft, steady, and unafraid. "I will, sir. But it will take time. It will take patience. It will take letting him lead, even when you want to fix everything at once." Dominic gave a faint, humorless smile at that, a smile tinged with exhaustion and truth. "I am not used to letting anyone lead me." Naomi's voice remained calm. "Then Matteo will be your first lesson." Dominic stared at her for a long moment, absorbing that truth with a quiet humility she had not expected from a man with his reputation. Slowly he nodded. Naomi turned her gaze back to the sleeping boy. She hesitated before speaking again, choosing her words with care. "Sir, there is something else you should know. Something important." Dominic straightened slightly, alert. "What is it?" Naomi swallowed, steadying herself. "Matteo may have autism, but autism is not his identity. It is just one of the many ways he experiences the world. He needs understanding, not fixing. He needs acceptance, not pressure." Dominic listened with an intensity that felt almost reverent. "And what does he need from me?" Naomi looked at him, her voice gentle. "He needs you to stop expecting yourself to be perfect. He needs you to stop thinking you are failing him. He needs you to be present, even when you do not know what to do." Dominic's eyes softened. "That is harder than it sounds." Naomi nodded. "I know. But if you try, he will feel it." The silence that followed was deep, almost tender. Dominic looked at her with quiet gratitude that tightened in his chest like a truth he had never allowed himself to feel. He whispered, "Naomi, you have changed everything tonight." She shook her head gently, her voice warm but firm. "No, sir. Matteo changed everything. I just listened." Dominic looked toward the door for a moment, the weight of his responsibilities flickering behind his eyes. His voice lowered. "The staff will talk. They will question your place here. Some may not like that you stepped into something they do not understand." Naomi breathed in slowly. "I know, sir. And I am prepared for that." Dominic's voice deepened. "I will protect you from that." Naomi gave him a grateful, quiet smile. "I appreciate that, sir. But kindness cannot come from protection alone. It must come from respect." Dominic absorbed her words again, letting them settle deep inside him. Then he nodded. "You will have both." Naomi looked back at Matteo, brushing a soft breath of air through her steady humming again. He stirred only slightly, then settled. Dominic watched the gentle connection between them, a connection that neither training nor authority could manufacture. After a long moment, he spoke again, voice soft but resolute. "Naomi, from this moment on, I want you to be the one to work with him, not as a maid, not as staff, as someone who understands him." Naomi froze, surprised by the gravity of his words. "Sir," she began carefully, "I am honored, but I need you to be certain. This is not easy work. This is not a simple choice." Dominic leaned closer, his voice steady. "I am certain, more certain than I have been about anything in a long time." Naomi looked at him, then at the boy they both hoped to understand. Finally, she nodded. Then I will stay by him. Dominic exhaled, the sound filled with both relief and emotion he no longer bothered to hide. And in that fragile quiet, in that soft glow of the small night light, the decision took root. A decision that would change all three of their lives forever. For a long moment, the room stayed wrapped in a stillness so deep that even the house seemed to be listening. The marble halls, the closed doors, the world outside all fading until there was nothing left but the small sound of Mateo's breathing and the quiet agreement that had just settled between Naomi and Dominic. Naomi let her eyes rest on the little boy, memorizing this version of him, the one who was not thrashing or screaming or hiding from a world that felt too sharp, but simply resting, his cheek pressed against the soft blanket, his small hand still curled around the fabric bracelet that had helped him survive the storm. Dominic watched him too, and for once, the fear in his eyes was not fear of losing control or fear of appearing weak, but fear of failing to live up to what this moment deserved. He rose first, moving slowly so as not to disturb his son, then extended a hand toward Naomi. She hesitated for a heartbeat, surprised by the gesture, then took it and allowed him to help her to her feet. Her knees ached from the time spent on the carpet, but she barely felt it. She stepped back only enough to give Mateo space, but her presence was still close, steady, protective. Dominic looked at her with a sincerity that felt almost unfamiliar in his own face. Naomi, he said quietly, from this night on, no one in this house will treat you as just staff again. You stood where no one else was willing to stand. You calmed what no one else could calm. You are not simply working here. You are part of the reason my son is breathing peacefully right now. And that changes everything. Naomi's chest tightened with emotion, but she kept her voice gentle. I am grateful for your trust, sir. Dominic nodded once, then glanced back at Mateo with a softness that made him look years younger. I will inform the staff in the morning, he said. Your responsibilities will change. They will understand that your primary purpose here is to help him, to guide him, to teach us all how to see him. If anyone disrespects you, they disrespect my son. Naomi absorbed the gravity of that promise in silence, understanding that in this house, protection from Dominic Castellano was not a small thing. It was a shield forged in power and loyalty, and tonight, he had placed it gently in her hands. A soft sound pulled both of their gazes back to Mateo. His eyes had opened slightly, heavy with sleep but aware. For a brief second, his gaze landed on Naomi, then drifted to Dominic standing just behind her. His small lips parted, and in a voice rough from crying but clear enough to break a heart, he whispered a single word. Papa. Dominic froze. The sound seemed to knock the air from his chest. His hand moved instinctively toward his son, but he stopped himself, remembering Naomi's guidance. Do not force closeness. Let him choose. Mateo blinked slowly, then shifted his small body just enough that the blanket opened on one side, creating a tiny space closer to Naomi. His fingers tugged weakly at the bracelet, and his eyes met hers again. Naomi stepped closer, lowering herself once more to the edge of the blanket, careful not to crowd him. I am here, Mateo, she whispered gently. You did so well. You are safe. Mateo reached out with a small, sleepy hand and let his fingers rest against her wrist, the contact light but deliberate. It lasted only a moment, but it was a bridge, a fragile connection built on trust that had never existed before. Dominic watched, eyes stinging, his throat tight with an emotion he could no longer pretend he did not feel. The most feared man in the city stood completely disarmed by the sight of his son choosing to touch another human being, not in panic, not in desperation, but in quiet trust. When Mateo's eyes fluttered closed again, Naomi gently laid her free hand on the floor, anchoring herself in the calm she had helped create. Dominic whispered, as if confessing a secret to the dim light. I never thought I would see him reach for anyone. He thought she was just a maid, someone who swept floors and stayed invisible in the corners of his empire. But tonight he had watched her step into the center of his deepest fear and transform it into hope. In that moment, something inside him shifted. Power no longer meant how many men he commanded or how many enemies feared his name. It meant standing in a dark room, learning how to love a child who saw the world differently, and having the humility to let a quiet woman guide him there. Naomi finally rose again, smoothing her clothes with a small, tired motion. She turned to Dominic, her voice soft but clear. "He will need this kind of support often, sir. Not just tonight. Not just in moments of crisis." Dominic nodded slowly. "Then this is only the beginning." Naomi gave a small, confident nod. "Yes, sir. This is the beginning of him knowing that he is not too much for the world. And you," she added gently, "this is the beginning of you knowing that you are not too late to be what he needs." The room fell quiet once more, but now the silence felt full of promise instead of dread. As Dominic stepped back toward the doorway, he took one last long look at his son and then at the woman who had changed everything in a single night. He had seen her comforting his autistic son and felt something he had never felt before. Not fear, not anger, not helplessness, but a deep, humbling gratitude and a fragile, stubborn hope that perhaps even the hardest hearts and the heaviest houses could be softened by simple, steadfast kindness. And that night, inside the mansion of a man the world called dangerous, a small boy slept in peace for the first time in a very long while, watched over by the father who was finally learning how to stay and the woman who had reminded them both what safety felt like. If you believe that kindness can heal even the deepest wounds, do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs hope today. Comment below and tell us, what part of this story touched your heart the most? And that day, in a house built on power and fear, the world remembered what dignity and gentle love look like.